Hello, everyone. We got to get better than that. Hello, everyone. Yeah. So we just had a conversation about affirmative action, about D&I, and now we're shifting and having a conversation about policing and criminal justice reform. And to have that conversation, we have the one and only Angela Yee, media personality Angela Yee, the one and only, who has graciously agreed to moderate this panel. And joining her on this panel, we have Marc Morial, the president of the Urban League. And of course, the one and only, the Attorney General, as he's often called, Ben Crump.
Okay, thank you so much, Ben Crump, Marc Morial, who I never get to see dressed down. All right, well, it is a pleasure to be here today alongside Ben and Marc. Thank you guys so much. Amazing panelists for us to have with us. And as we know, they have spent their entire careers fighting for social justice. And there's no issue more urgent than policing and criminal justice reform. Here we sit. It's been 3 years since George Floyd was brutally murdered, and that did shine a bright spotlight for the whole country to see. A lot of people did think this might be a turning point when the nation was finally forced to confront the policing crisis that communities of color face every day. But right now, as we sit here, this crisis is as urgent as ever. As a matter of fact, data is showing the number of Black people killed by police in America has actually risen every year since George Floyd's murder. So this is a very urgent conversation for us to have. All right, so awareness is not enough. And what we want to do today is, while we're aware there's a major crisis, there's a state of emergency, what can we actually do? That is the mission of the Global Black Economic Forum. So let's talk about this. All right, let's start with you, Ben. 3 years after George Floyd, have things changed, and is it better or worse?
Well, like everything, progress is something that is measured one day at a time. And we have made great progress since George Floyd was tortured to death. I mean, when you think about it, Marc Morial, Angela Yee, 20 years from now, police killed us unjustifiably, unnecessarily, unconstitutionally, and nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. And because of you all being my co-counsels, we were able to get, for the first time in history, a police officer in the state of Minnesota convicted for killing a Black man of guilty, guilty, guilty. But it didn't stop there, Angela, while we are making progress, and I know I'm singing to the choir, but the choir has to sing louder. We have to keep pushing, because Breonna Taylor, our Black sister, was killed just as unjustly as George Floyd, but yet there still hasn't been justice for her, as there not for many Black women. I mean, when you think about what Malcolm X said, Angela Yee, he said that the Black woman is the most disrespected, neglected, and unprotected person in America. And so we think about, you know, Sandra Bland. We think about Atiana Jefferson, and we then look at Breonna Taylor, and we can never, ever give up the fight for our people, because when we fight, we win. Breonna Taylor, killers, for the first time in history, thanks to Kristen Clark, a Black woman leading the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, for the first time in history, brought federal charges for police officers killing a Black woman. Think about how many Black women police killed in history. Never once have there been charges brought. But because we're standing together and we refuse to let them sweep it under the rug, That's why we're going to win and get justice for Breonna too. And so whether it's Ahmaud Arbery, Andre Hill, all these people who've happened since George Floyd, they have been officers charged and convicted. We didn't see that. So we're making progress. Now, what can we do? What do we have to do? Angela, since they're not going to pass the George Floyd Justice Policing Act because of the political gridlock in Washington, D.C., homework assignment, y'all can say, you know, Black America Attorney General gave us a homework assignment in essence. You all got to go to your cities and you got to see in your city, has the chokehold been banned? I bet you all will be surprised to know that the chokehold is still legal where you live. So don't worry about what's going to happen in Minnesota. You need to worry about what's happening in your own hometown. Go to City Hall and say we're going to ban it. And I'll say these two things before I pass it back, Angela. You all do understand, and I don't think Minnesota is different from many places in America. Over 90% of the time when the police applied the chokehold in the state of Minnesota, it was against a man of color, even though black men in Minnesota black people in Minnesota only made up 6% of the population. Think about that. 6% of the population, but every time they say they're going to choke somebody, it's a brother. No knock warrants. Breonna Taylor. Y'all do understand that Louisville is about 30% black, but almost 95% of the time, when the police said they're going to execute a no-knock warrant in violation of the Fourth Amendment constitutional rights against unlawful search and seizure, it was against a black person, a black household. They weren't kicking in our white brothers and sisters' doors at 1 o'clock in the morning. So it was foreseeable that you were going to have somebody innocent like Breonna Taylor when they kicked in her door at 1 o'clock in the morning. And you think about it, well, everybody's saying they have a right to guns and people kicking in your front door, you don't know who it is? You're right. Her boyfriend, Kenny, had an absolute right, Marc, to try to defend his home and defend his castle and defend his woman when they came in and kicked in the door. So you got to also go back to your city and say, do we have a ban against no-knock warrants? Where's Breonna's law in New Orleans? Where's Breonna's law in Birmingham? Where's Breonna's law in Atlanta banning the police from executing unnecessary, unjustifiable, and unconstitutional no-knock warrants? Because they ain't kicking in white people's doors. They kicking in black people's doors. So you all need to ask that question. And so that's what we can do, Angela. We don't want to wait on the Supreme Court to save us. No, we're going to save ourselves.
Well, we definitely can't wait on the Supreme Court to save us. Marc Morial, I want to ask you this. Since you talked about local laws and what's happened locally, you are formerly the mayor of New Orleans. And when you came to New Orleans as mayor, the police department was terrible. All right, can we talk about some things that you did locally, because that's something that we're talking about right now. What did you do to actually improve the police department?
Well, thank you very much, and it's good to be with you. Happy Essence to all. So I took over as mayor of this city in 1994. I was 35 years old. I was elected on a wave of young, new, elected officials. And we had a situation where we had 421 murders in the year before I took office, more than one a day in a city of about 500,000. And number two, we had the highest number of civil rights complaints against the New Orleans Police Department. So I decided from day one that I needed to institute significant change. So I literally bulldozed the operation and completely overhauled it. What did this mean? And let me tell you the lesson, and Ben has made this point. The power to change policing lies in City Hall. Mayors choose police chiefs in most cities. Mayors can hire and fire police chiefs. Mayors can set the budget, can set the policy. Police is a function of local government. So apropos to what Ben has said, we can't wait for Congress or anyone else to fix this problem. We have to apply pressure, and yes, that means on black elected officials, on white elected officials, on friend and foe alike. Pressure to bring about change. So we overhauled the New Orleans Police Department. First thing we did, I cleaned house. We fired almost 100 officers over a period of 36 months. Number two, we changed the philosophy of policing to a community-oriented policing system, which means police officers were on patrol, on foot, on bikes, and made relationships with leaders in the community, with ministers and community leaders. And we brought the crime rate down while reducing the number of arrests. This is important because we went to a preventive model of policing involving community policing. I put into place a public integrity division, an internal function which could, in fact, investigate officers when there was a citizen's complaint. I took the public integrity division, moved it out of police headquarters, put it in a neighborhood so people didn't have to feel intimidated by going to the police department to file a complaint against the department. Number two, if we found a rogue cop, we turned them over to the FBI. We turned them over for prosecution. There are two former New Orleans police officers today on death row. Two, Len Davis and Antoinette Franks. Two on death row for killing people, and in one for ordering a hit on someone that filed a complaint against him. I, in a short period of time, in 5 years, reduced the murder rate by 60%, the violent crime rate by 60%, and brought the complaints down. Now, here's the point. My police chief, Richard Pennington, the late Richard Pennington, and I, when we left office in 2002, it took 2 years for the department to retrench to the way it was, because the people that succeeded us were not committed. They were not committed. I took the position that I would not be intimidated by any police unions. I would not be intimidated by any right-wing politicians. I was not going to be deterred in carrying this out. And I told the public that if you want a thriving community, we had to have a safe community, and we had to have a just community, and we had to have a police department which respected the people. This is an example. Now, I did this without a consent decree, without the Department of Justice oversight. I did it because I was committed to it. And I left office here with a 70% approval rating, right? So what I did was not only effective, but it was popular. And I was very upfront in saying to people, we're going to clean up this police department. And we're not going to brook any opposition, and we're not going to be intimidated by anyone. I told the business powers that be that they needed to support me. I enforced a city residency rule that required police officers to live in the city. I withstood lawsuits that challenged that. I took the position that if you're going to work for us, now I did some interesting things. I raised the pay, I upped the standards, I changed the training, I allowed lateral hires, but I did that only after 2 to 3 years I put in place a reform system. What's the lesson? Go to the Urban League website and look up the 21 Pillars plan. We have promulgated 21 ideas that mostly can be implemented at the local level, with local energy and a commitment from public and elected officials to do the absolute right thing. So policing, while we need the George Floyd bill, while we need an aggressive Department of Justice to prosecute, while we need all of these things, there is a lot of power in City Hall. There's a lot of power at City Hall to make a difference. So we have to be in this moment with this state of emergency on affirmative action, this state of emergency on Black history, this state of emergency on the justice system, this state of emergency with the assaults on Black America. We have to use our power and our pressure locally to bring about these sorts of changes. And so I just want to encourage that to each and every one of you, because sometimes we think, and sometimes we have some elected officials, and I can talk about some politicians because I used to be one, right? And that is, they sit on their hands, they make excuses, and they're afraid to be assertive. I was assertive, and I never, ever had an approval rating below 60% in this town, because I went all through the community meetings, churches, and told people exactly what we were going to do. And if someone challenged me, I said, where is your plan? Where are your ideas? Put it on the table. One of them admitted, I have no plan. So if you don't have a plan, get on out of the way.
And that's what this is about, tangible things that we can do. Now, Attorney Ben Crump, I know we have some people here also who have joined us, and
yes, we do. And just like Marc was saying, it's up to all of us to use our collective influence. Our friend, Reverend Al Sharpton, always says one of the hardest things to do is to preach the eulogy of an insignificant Negro who had influence and could have made a difference, but chose to play it safe. So I'm real proud when we have brothers and sisters who have influence, not be afraid to use that influence when it matters most. And we have a couple of them with us today. Our good friend, actor Jonathan Majors, is here with us at the Essence Fest. And Marc, Morial, and Angela Yee, we have a sister who's always been using her influence. You look at her social media, she's always there fighting for us, whether it was back to Trayvon Martin. And so we grew up with this sister. We first saw her in a movie called Eve's Bayou, and then she was in a movie called Stomp the Yard, and then she was in Think Like a Man, and now she's has an award-winning show, Harlem. Y'all give it up for y'all homegirl, one and only, Megan Good. Y'all stand up for Megan, because Megan is doing this from her heart. This wasn't planned. She was just enjoying Essence Fest and said she would come up here and talk about what we can do to help our people. So thank you, Megan. And Angela, I'll turn it back over to you.
yes. And by the way, Megan, this was totally for her. She just was back there doing her own makeup, like, I gotta go out there, even though I'm not on the... So part of it is for us knowing what can we do as people who are individuals that are not in politics, we're not attorneys, but what is it, what are some things that we can do? Because the main question people ask is, well, how can I assist and how can I help? And we don't want to ever feel helpless, right? And so Attorney Ben Crump, you know, we are seeing a huge rise in the number of stand your ground defenses as an excuse for killing Black people. So how can we reverse this? And I know you have something really important you want to talk about.
And I think people like Megan and Marc, Morial, and others, because we all have to educate ourselves, we have to engage ourselves, and we have to empower ourselves in our communities. And I mean, Trayvon Martin was killed by citizens. We can't just say it's the police killing us, because they have laws like Stand Your Ground that are encouraging people to be violent against Black life. We saw it with Trayvon almost 11 years ago. We saw it with Ahmaud Arbery, you know, when he was lynched for jogging while black, not in 1940, not in 1950, but in 2020. We saw it with our own eyes, and they still didn't arrest his killers. They went home and slept in their bed at night, just like Trayvon's killer. And most recently, we saw a black woman in Ocala, Florida, who was going to get her children's laptop after a white 58-year-old woman called them the N-word, called them little slaves, and that this isn't the Underground Railroad. And she knocked on the door, and the white woman shot through a locked metal door and killed A.J. Owens in front of her 9-year-old and 12-year-old little boys. And now more than ever, we got to have people like Megan, who got influence just like we did with Breonna Taylor, say her name, A.J. Owens, because if not, they will sweep it under the rug. And yeah, and before I pass it to Megan, if I could, Angela, I want to acknowledge the mother of A.J. Owens, who's present with us, to just stand and be acknowledged. Pam, here, why don't you?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's so sad that I'm here meeting you, speaking in front of you under these circumstances, but I appreciate each and every one of you. As Benjamin Crump said, my daughter was shot and killed with her 9-year-old son standing next to her, simply just to get an answer as to what happened, as any mom would do. Now, she leaves behind a 12-year-old son who had to make the necessary calls, a 9-year-old who was standing next to her, a 7-year-old daughter, and a 3-year-old. I am now the primary caretaker, and it is a senseless act, but this is where we are in 2023. A single mother gets shot for simply knocking on a door. It's sad, but I thank you all for acknowledging this and for not letting it be swept under the rug as Marion County, Ocala.
We love you.
Do.
We love you.
Thank you.
Justice for AJ. Justice for AJ. Justice for AJ.
I think the biggest thing, the place that I come from, is that many of us feel like we have no idea how we can get involved, what we can do, if our voice can be heard, if it makes a difference. And the biggest thing is that I want to encourage you, the more that we band together, the more that we constantly project and make noise and share these conversations and educate ourselves and educate each other, together we can actually do what we've been doing and we continue to go in the right direction. And so, you know, I can't say that I'm the most eloquent speaker on this. I can't say that I know everything. I'm constantly learning and evolving. And because of that, for a long time, it made me feel very insecure about getting involved. You know, can I make a difference, or should I just be quiet? I'm just an actress or whatever it is. But learning that simply even me just amplifying my voice, the way that I can amplify my voice is if you amplify my voice, and then this person amplifies your voice, and this person amplifies your voice. And I can't do it by myself, but if we all do it together, that's how we're able to support Attorney Crump and support Marc and support AJ's mother and really, really make a difference. The same way that we did with Breonna Taylor, where, you know, again, we were talking backstage. This was a case that had happened months prior that we weren't even aware of. And as soon as we got activated and as soon as we all started talking and marching and doing everything that we can within our personal power, is when we gave people who have more power the power to do the things that need to be done. And so for me, the biggest thing is I just want to encourage us to know that every single one of our voices, it really, really does matter, and it really, really does make the difference. And we need each other in order to force the hand and to make the change that we have to see.
Great.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
And Marc and Ben, I want to ask you both, when we think about solutions, what do you think about community policing? What role does technology play? How are these things that can be game changers?
Community policing is important. It can make a difference if it is defined for what it really should be. Community policing puts a focus on prevention. It puts a focus on working with and building relationships of trust in the community with the idea that you can prevent violence and prevent crime, and that you can also focus in a community on the things that the people want you to focus on. In most communities, people do not want to see a focus of harassment of young black men, arresting people for minuscule and minor things, which is what I call lazy policing. What they want is a focus on those things that really hurt people: shootings, violence, sexual assault. So what community policing does is it centers the work of a police department around the things that people assign as priorities, and it puts a focus on prevention. To do it right, you have to train officers how to talk to people. You have to train officers on how to respect people. You have to train that a police department is not a military occupying force. Right. Protect and serve means something. Number two, I think today community policing does not go far enough. I think you have to have mechanisms that address other challenges we have in the community, like unhoused people, like people with substance abuse and mental health issues, which can be responded to by people who are not armed, people who are trained as social workers and psychologists. We have to do things differently than perhaps even what I did in the 1990s with a focus on community policing. If I were leading now, I'd place great emphasis on nonviolent dispute resolution. So, Ras Baraka, the mayor of Newark, anybody here from Newark, anybody here from New Jersey? So Ras and Newark have put into place, and other cities have done it, a nonviolent dispute resolution system where you have brothers and sisters, sometimes they were formerly involved in gangs, whose job it is to diffuse the kind of beefs, rivalries, and disputes that create the escalation of violence and retaliatory violence. So we have to address today's problems with new strategies. Community policing, yes, but we need to do it right. It's not a slogan. It is a comprehensive approach to how you do policing. And I'll talk about technology. The George Floyd case was made possible because of Darnella Frazier's courage. Now let's understand, this young woman had the presence of mind to coolly and calmly turn on her phone and record the entire incident from beginning to end. Let me tell you what that meant. If this case had occurred 15 years ago, it would have been he say, she say, we say. You'd have heard that George Floyd went to grab my gun. You would have heard that George Floyd resisted arrest.
Had drugs in his
You'd have heard all kinds of things, and it would have been, as it always is, a dead black man's word against living white police officers' words in front of a jury or in front of a grand jury. So that instance, so we have to make sure, and there are efforts around the country to suppress a person's First Amendment right to tape interactions in a public space between the police and citizens. That is our right. All a phone is an extension of my eyes. And all I'm doing is recording what my eyes see. So technology, body cams, and the use of technology can be an important tool if used right. But do not expect any type of technology to, on its own and by itself, to solve what is essentially a challenge of human dynamics and human behavior and institutionalized racism. It has to be much more. So I embrace technology, used right with the proper safeguards, but I don't see it as a panacea. But that video made George Floyd. That meant people in New Zealand, Austria, Mexico City, and all across the United States could look at that video and on their own make a judgment that what they saw was the murder of an innocent man. It made all the difference in the world. All the difference in the world. And we've got to recognize that and understand that a simple device like an iPhone can be very, very instrumental. I'll tell you one last story. I was in the train station in Newark. And all of a sudden, there was loud noises. An argument began to ensue between a man who was, I think, had some mental challenges, and about 6 police officers. Almost instantaneously, there were half a dozen black women who moved on this site, and every one of them was there with their phone. Every one of them, and I said, this is such a powerful thing, right? They're gonna record what happens in terms of this incident. And so the power of our ability to be watchdogs, to be observant, and therefore to be part of this accountability, we cannot we cannot underestimate the value of it.
You know, I want to say about technology, and then I want to talk about community policing. But more importantly, Marc and Angela and Megan, talk about community. You know, when I think about technology, obviously, you think about George Floyd, you think about Ahmaud Arbery, where we captured on video, and you really, I remember I got asked this question a lot after George Floyd in the interviews. They said, what's the difference, Attorney Crump, between Rodney King, who was killed in the brutalized in the 80s by cops in Los Angeles, and George Floyd? And my answer was always very simple. The quality of the iPhone, because the video was better. Because black people have been saying for decades, the police brutalizing us, they're using excessive force. Nobody would believe us, but now we get to see it. And yeah, just like after we said on January 6th, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a video is worth billions. Billions. And that was George Floyd video, Ahmaud, and now with Tyree Nichols. Y'all think about that in Memphis, Tennessee, wow, how that narrative would have went.
Right.
You know, he was erratically driving, he was not complying, he assaulted an officer, and then when we saw the video, Jonathan, man, Tyree couldn't have been more compliant.
Do nothing.
What did he say? What did I do? He said, I'm just trying to get home. And if we didn't have that video, those officers wouldn't have been charged. I know I got limited time, so I can't be on my soapbox, but just like they terminated, arrested, and charged those 5 black police officers, that's the new precedent now. So the next time white officers are brutalized and kill us, we want them to be arrested too in 5 days. We can't have 2 justice systems, one for black America and another for white America. And that's what technology has helped us make the argument even more crystal. I'll say this last thing because when I think about community policing, Marc, and you did a great job. Y'all give Marc a round of applause for New Orleans. I mean, incredible job, Marc. But I think that it can't just be the responsibility of our community leaders. It has to be each one of us. And we have to, you know, I want y'all to remember this now, and I'm talking over music, and I'm gonna make it loud because this is more important than the jam. We have to understand the lesson of upstream. And what do you say, Attorney Crump, by upstream? It's this here, it's a great book. It's simply this. There was a brother walking one sunny afternoon downriver, minding his business. All of a sudden, he heard a young black child in the river screaming, "Help me, help me, help me, I'm drowning, help me, I'm gonna die, help me." And the brother all of a sudden jumped in the river, and he saved the young black child's life by dragging him on the riverbank. And he said, "My God, thank you. If I wasn't here, that young black child would have died." And just after he was gathering himself and he was getting the water off his clothes and so forth, he heard a second black child saying, "Help me, I'm drowning, help me, I'm gonna die, save me, help me." And so Marc, the brother, jumped back in the river again, and he dragged the second black child to the riverbank and saved his life. And he said, "Thank God I was here. Had I not been here, that young second black child would have died." And just as he was trying to get the water out of his hair, Jonathan, getting himself together, Megan, he heard a third black child say, "Help me, I'm drowning, help me, I'm gonna die, save me." And so the brother jumped back in the river for a third time, and he dragged the third black child to the riverbank. But this time, as he was dragging the child to the riverbank, he said, "What I want to know is who the hell upstream keep throwing our children in the river, because it's too late to save them once they get downstream. So we all got to go upstream. We got to prevent them from throwing our children into the system, getting them caught up in the school-to-prison pipeline, getting them caught up in the cycle of violence and black-on-black crime and street violence and drugs. We got to be upstream and be strategic and be intentional about making sure we can prevent our children from getting caught up. It's not just about policing, it's about all kind of injustices for our people. So if y'all remember nothing, let's go upstream and prevent our children before they get in the system.
Drop the mic.
Okay, and listen, I know our time is limited, but I want to make sure that we end on this, because I know this is a question that Megan Good asked when she came on stage. What can I do? For everybody in this room, in this audience that has the question, well, what can I do? How can I help? How can I support? What are some things that you would say to them that are tangible things that we can walk away from and say, this is what I'm going to do right now, today, and in the future?
So I'm going to say, and I'm going to bet that the people who are in here are already involved in community. So I want you to be a member of the National Urban League. Go to nul.org. But here's what I say. Be a member and be a part of something. The worst thing we can be is in the gallery, in the stands, watching and observing and moaning and complaining and not active and involved. We have to be involved organizationally, online, in the church, through civic organizations. We have got to be involved. And when we are involved, our organizations have to be relevant in addressing the issues of today. Not just be about social, not just be about platitudes, not just being honorific, but address the issues of today. Number two, we better understand that the most precious power we have is the power to vote. Now, I'll tell you, because I watched this, and I've watched these mayor's races across the country over the last 3 years. How can we have these races and have 25, 35% voter turnout? When we made great progress in the 70s, the 80s, and 90s, you look at these historic mayor's races in places like Detroit, Chicago, Los Angeles, New Orleans, Atlanta, even Houston in the 1990s. You had 50 and 60 and 70 and 80% voter turnout. Now I hear people who say, you know, my vote doesn't count. Man, let me tell you, every time you say that, the right wing is cheering. Let them be that dumb and that stupid that they think their vote don't count because you know what? Then ours counts for more. Yep. We've got to fight voter suppression, and we've got to battle self-suppression of our own power. So I'm not going to say that voting is a panacea, that politicians will save you. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say that voting is a tool that we have. Protesting is a tool that we have. Being active is a tool that we have. We have to use every single tool at our disposal to fight and work for the change we need today. And we have to be active and we have to be involved. And that's the most, some of this is basic. It's not complex. It's not overly sophisticated. And those who are looking for magic bullets, the fight we had when we were fighting, our ancestors, our fathers and mothers were fighting against legal segregation. It was about passing one or two laws. In today's world, it is more than that. The problems are far more complicated and the work we have to do. So I'm gonna just ask you, if you are involved, get your friends and family members involved. We cannot stand on the side.
Let's give Megan the last word. I will say this real quick. What I want y'all to do for me, though, when y'all get that jury notice to come and serve on jury duty, y'all do understand the hardest thing for a black lawyer is to go in the courtroom with our black client, and the only other thing we see black in the courtroom is the judge's robes, because Negroes got the jury notice to come to jury duty, and they said, oh, I can't miss Real Housewives. They come up with every excuse in the world not to come and serve on that jury. And you know what, Marc? It's so deep because they all say Black Lives Matter and all this stuff, but the one time they really can save a black life is coming to serve on that jury and save a black child from becoming a convicted felon. And so that's all I add. Megan gonna get the final word, but y'all please, just one of y'all in the room, just one of y'all in the room, it could be, everybody else on the jury could be white. It changed the whole dynamic of what they gonna do. Make it good.
No pressure. And the biggest thing is that I just want everybody to truly take it personal. We can't just be at home and watching our TV and watching our social media and having an opinion and crying and saying, oh, well, I feel like I'm, getting to a point where I just don't want to see this anymore. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to hear about it and all these things. We have the ability to really, really be the change that we want to see. It really is that simple. And it is complex and it is hard, but it's also that simple. We need to educate ourselves on who we should be voting for and who stands for what and who has, said that these are the things that they've been involved with and these are the things that they want to change and all of that. And we do need to vote. At the end of the day, so many people are caught up on, well, I don't think it makes a difference. Well, it's not going to hurt, and the chance that it could make a difference could make all the difference in the world. And the only way that it matters is not if you and me and me and me and you show up, it's if all of us show up. And so I just wanted to encourage everyone to just take it personal because these are our lives and so many of us, we're not moving at the magnitude that we should until it's somebody that we know or until it's our own children or until it's our own father or sibling or brother, whatever it may be. And so the biggest thing is that we have so much that we can do. And if we all, as Marc said, use every single tool that's available to us, then we can have peace knowing that. And we can also have peace knowing that things are changing.
Well, thank you so much. This was an amazing panel to be on. And
thank you, Angela Yee.
Pamela, thank you so much, too, for joining us.
Give it up for Angela Yee.
Give it up.
Listen to her show 10 to 2.
That's right, way up with Angela Yee. And I also want to encourage people to run for office, too, okay? Because you can also run for office or encourage somebody you know who you think would be great in that position, who you support, who's a great community leader. Run for office.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Essence.
Thank you, Essence.